Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to Positive Talk, everybody. My name is Kevin McDonald, and sitting over there with that smile on his face is John Verico. John, how are you today? We've got a great show, by the way, and stuff.
Always a great show, Kevin. I mean, there's nothing unusual about having a great show.
I know, but it's a matter of degrees. See, we've got good degrees, and then we've got great degrees, and then we've got really hot degrees, if you know what I mean.
Well, this is going to be volcanic today because we've got some really great guests, and they've been on before, and so I'm always looking forward to chatting with them and seeing who they bring us.
Oh, I know. And by the way, they've been on the show many, many times before. We fell in love with them. They, like you, have got roots in celebrity and roots in people that have done some really good things in the world as far as entertainment goes and stuff. They used to do interviews on the red carpet and the Oscars and the Grammys and all of that stuff. So they've met quite a few people over time. But more importantly, what they're doing today, and I had my teeth worked on, so I think I can say the Passionistas Project better than I ever could before. And so I'd like to introduce Amy and Nancy, and they're right here right now. Hey kids, how you doing?
There we are.
How are you today?
So great to see you guys again. It's been a couple of weeks.
Nice to see you both too.
Which is what we do because we here at Positive Talk, because our friend Holly instigated this, and she's off doing other things today, but she instigated the fact that you guys, because of the Passionistas Project and the sisterhood and all the things that you do with women in general and women of color and women with special needs and helping other folks and building a community, and we want to support you in that.
You are the best support. We so appreciate everything you've done for us and the women in our community and how kind you always are to all of us. So thank you.
Well, I do have to say you don't have to say that because it is very self-serving. Because
that's good too.
Because John, they create a great show. They bring great guests, people that we wouldn't otherwise get to meet. And they also work to develop the sisterhood, which we're going to talk about during this show a little bit. Excellent. But John, would you like to introduce them for our audience so they can introduce the guest they brought with them?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, Amy and Nancy Harrington, who are frequent guests here and bring us the most wonderful additional guests. The Passionistas Project is really one of the most amazing things that I've heard about. And so I'm always so excited. I've only had a chance to work with you guys once on the show. I've listened to several previous episodes and said, you know what? They're freaking awesome. We got to have them back over and over again. So please, let's just get into it.
Okay, let's do it. Thank you for that, John. We're excited to get to know you more as the episodes unfold too. So it's been fun.
So we brought with us a very special guest. Her name is Kathy Barron, and she is the editor of Women Who Podcast magazine. She's our latest Power Passionista in the community, and she is just an all-around fabulous person who is an integral part of our sisterhood and very involved. So we're thrilled to bring her here today and talk about what she does.
Yeah. And she's really fun to talk to.
Yeah.
First of all, before we get into that, what is a Power Passionista? Aren't you impressed?
Beat me to it
twice in a row.
You're doing so good, Kevin.
Doing so good, Kevin. I'm proud of you. A Power Passionista is a woman in our community who is an expert in her field. So Amy and I aren't really coaches or things like that. So when women come to the community and are looking for expertise in certain areas, we like to have women who can give them that resource. So our Power Passionistas are the ones who lead workshops and courses and classes. And they also have their own spaces in the group so that they can use those spaces to communicate with the sisters in any way that they want.
Yeah. And like Kathy, we've had other Power Passionistas on the show with you, like Julie DeLuca Collins and Dr. Melissa Bird and Lauren Best and people like that. So
You name dropper, you.
drop their names. They're so good to us. I like to give them a little extra love.
I love it. I love it. So just take another minute, and Kathy I'm looking forward to getting into this discussion, but really quickly, Amy and Nancy, if you had to do that 30-second elevator speech on what Passionistas is all about, because there are some people who are listening today that I've invited to listen because I wanted them to hear you specifically. So could you just give a little, nitty gritty of what you're all about?
Sure. Well, I would say that, first of all, Amy and I are sisters, if anyone hasn't figured that out yet. And we have heard from women over and over again for many, many years that they wish that they had what we have. And that is that unbreakable bond, undying loyalty, fun, and commitment to each other, and somebody that's there to lift you up when you're down and cheer you on when you're winning. And so we offer that relationship to the women in our community. There's an online community where women can come and get support and resources and network and have a little fun. And it's a beautiful space.
Yeah, we have classes and courses and workshops. We have an anthology book that we're putting together with a bunch of the women in the community where they get to tell their authentic stories about awakening their power. And at the core of it all, it's all about telling the stories of women who don't often get the spotlight. So we love to, we have a podcast where we interview women that you might not usually hear from. It's really about giving a space and a platform for largely women from marginalized communities, but everybody is welcome. So,
and that's wonderful that you're there to provide a sister for those people that were not fortunate enough to have one in their life, whether it's a blood sister or even a heart sister, to be able to find somebody who gets you, who understands you, and is there for you. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And now let's find out about your guest. Oh, Kevin, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention this because I just had this epiphany. It didn't hurt at all.
That's a word.
I know. And I was just thinking, with all the work that you do, and you two have got your own podcast, which is called
the Passionistas Project Podcast.
See, if you could spell that, that would be great. And,
it'll be in the chat.
Passionistas. So I was thinking, maybe you guys should think about developing, I don't know, like a magazine about podcasting or the do's and how to make it all work and the pitfalls and all that kind of stuff. Have you ever thought about doing something like that or meeting somebody like that?
Luckily, we don't have to do that because the lovely Kathy Barron has already done it so well. And she's our newest really close heart sister. So we'll let Kathy tell you all about women who podcast.
Well, I was going to say I can vouch for what Nancy and Amy had said about being sisters because they're sisters from another mister. And, it doesn't take long to build a relationship with them because they are so warming and welcoming and caring. So I am grateful that I found the Passionistas Project and found the sisterhood. So thank you for creating that space.
We're glad you found us.
Thank you for creating. Yes. And thank you for creating what you're doing. Tell us a little bit about Women Who Podcast Magazine.
Well, Women Who Podcast Magazine came to be because there was a huge gap that there wasn't a magazine out there specific for independent women podcasters. And I feel like they really don't get the accolades and the spotlight that they deserve. And so that's why my muse came up with this idea, and why I decided just to go for it. I had some training in Illustrator, in design. I never published a magazine before, so this was all something very new. But I'm also one that's up for a challenge. Uh, so it'll be 4 years in next April.
Wait a minute.
So
You said Illustrator and design. So you're actually doing the whole design of the magazine, not just
yeah, this
putting it
is
together and
from
editing.
scratch. Yeah.
Oh, bless you. I know. I used to do similar things in the earlier part of my career, and I admire the heck out of you. I just got to say that.
Well, it's definitely trial and error, and there's, definitely a learning curve, but I've got some great writers that help me out with the interviewing. And when we interview the featured podcasters, we don't just send them an email with questions. We actually get on a Zoom call with them and actually have a conversation and ask, talk to them about their podcast, how they got started, what the behind the scenes story is. Because to me, that's more personable than just having them answer, questions through email. And then we write the article based on that interview. So, I would love to go meet these people in person, but there's only so much money that you can. I'm waiting for my angel investor to call me up.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to have like a mass gathering.
Oh,
just
yeah.
be like a whole women
Yeah,
who
definitely.
podcast the women who podcast the conference,
Mhm.
the convention.
Well, we
Or-
need to
or-
partner with the Passionistas Project for that, because we have this whole plan about renting a village in Italy for.
Nice.
So.
You know, there's a town named Verico in Italy.
Oh, really?
Just saying. I've never
Yeah.
been.
I got a couple bookmarked.
Nice. Can't wait to hear that.
Oh yeah, we'll talk.
So Kathy, did you decide to create the magazine and then the podcast, or did you have a podcast and then you decided to supplement it with the magazine?
Well, there isn't a podcast called Women Who Podcasts. It's just a magazine. I've had my own podcast for 6 years that I actually ended in April, but I'm going to relaunch in January because,
you.
you can take the podcast. What is it? You can take yourself out of the podcast, but you can't take the podcast out of you.
You can take the podcast out of the girl, but you can't take the girl out of the podcast.
Right.
So what was that podcast?
It's called Women Who Sarcast. And it was had a good run. It was 6 years, but I'm going to bring it back. And with everything going on, I decided to take a break from it. But it's definitely something that I love doing. So we're going to kick it off again. And Amy and Nancy are actually going to be my first guest back in January. So.
Check that out. Women Who Sarcast.
Mhm.
World needs more sarcasm, I think.
That's right.
I love it.
Has to be our first guest.
I've
Go
never
ahead,
known
Jen.
a woman who can fake a sarcasm.
And that's a good thing.
It's a really good thing.
There's another bumper sticker. That's
Yeah.
so. Well, I'm glad that you're going to restart it again, because I know it's in podcasting. I haven't been doing this very long, but I found that podcasting gets into your blood, and since I'm now am close to 20 years doing it, and I can't quit. And John tells me I do too many and I can't stop. I just can't, because I enjoy being here and enjoy getting to talk to you and stuff. How do you convince women that have got a message, that their message needs to be heard and that they need to explore the opportunities that podcasting can offer?
I don't know if it's about convincing. I think it's encouraging, because I feel like women who want to start a podcast are already convinced they need to do it. I think they need the encouragement to pull the trigger and to get the support that they need to continue. because with women, there's some that are single parents that have families that have kids, and usually, the first thing, if something happens within their lives that is keeps them busy, the first thing that they drop off is the podcast, because it's a passion project. It's not bringing in money normally, and so that's the first thing to go. So, but if they had the support, they had the encouragement to continue. I think what's the statistic that's like 7 episodes and then people end their podcast? Like, we need to get women past that 7th episode, and having that support and encouraging them to continue, that they do have a voice, they do have something to say, I think will help them go for the long haul instead of taking it episode to episode. They kind of need to look to the future a little bit to see what it looks like.
And to
Not
support
only
each
do-
other, to listen to each other's podcasts, because you can't go on Apple Podcast and search women's podcasts. You can't go on any platform. If you upload a podcast, you cannot classify it as being women centric. So it's really hard for women to find podcasts hosted by women, and they want that. They really are hungry for that. So I think we need to encourage each other to listen to each other's podcasts and be an audience, so that they're feeling like they're being heard and they're not just shouting into dead air.
And, I find that surprising that it's not a category of interest.
Isn't that interesting?
It's one of my big
Seriously.
rants. You don't want to get me started.
Wow. Well, yeah, like the industry needs
Apple
to.
Podcast has set the list, right? And there's about 10 categories. And there's,
But even if they had a box to check women owned or women operated or women something,
For women topics.
yeah.
I mean, you would think.
but see, their
just a-
category might not be about women issues though, or
Well, that's true. That's true.
specific. It could be true
But
crime
a lot
or
of them
whatever.
are, and you would think that would at least be a category to choose from.
Yeah.
Yes.
We don't, there is no category that really applies to what we do on our podcast.
No.
We need a protest.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's camp out.
Well, and there's a couple of schools of thought about that. One is that you should niche down into a real small space and have the same information. But in your case, the passionistas, you have so many different types and individuals and what they're doing and how they're helping people that you can't. It's not it's like what I do. It's not possible for you to niche down.
Yeah. There should be a category called women's empowerment at the very least, where
Mhm.
Yeah, but you know what? Some guy someplace that's developing these lists. and it's-
oh,
you think?
Oh, Kevin, no. What are you talking about?
And he feels threatened, so he just scratched that right off the list.
yeah, some dude that says, "Oh, women don't listen to the podcast anyway." and-
No.
I think the most important.
Very small market.
Or have any spending power within the households.
Yeah, right. Of course. It's not just the fact that people have to encourage people to say, look, we know you have something to say and you need to be out there, but also the fact that there are people that want to listen.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that are going to benefit from what you have to say. And that, I think, is the true encouragement right there. Because I know a lot of people that have a lot to say or think they have a lot to say, but they don't think anybody wants to listen. So they just don't.
Yeah. Well, then there are those that have a lot to say that only
there's that.
because they like to hear themselves talk.
Then there's that.
There's that.
That's not a category either, but maybe that should be a category. Likes to hear myself talk.
Will probably happen before women's empowerment.
Yeah, probably. But I think for the magazine, it's for listeners and podcasters, because it's a great way for listeners to learn about a women-operated, women-owned podcast that they may not have come across, because these podcasts are like, you're not going to find them in the 10%. You're not going to find them definitely not in the 1%. And so, this magazine is just a way to give them another platform to get discovered, basically. And it's the articles are very personable. They're you know, these women pour their hearts out. They have their heart on their sleeve, and they're not afraid to be vulnerable and to tell their story. And it's great because the many stories that I've heard, the women that I've met are just amazing. They're just amazing people
That's
to
that's
put
that's
themselves
excellent.
out there in such. You know, one was her podcast is about, you know, domestic violence and, you know, sexual assault. I mean, for women to be able to talk about that,
Yeah.
and in such a way that is going to reach millions of people, that takes a lot of courage. So,
I was just
you
going to say
know,
that.
I
Yeah.
think that is also why we need to encourage and support women, because these stories are very powerful, but they also have to be very vulnerable. And, you know, it's a lot of personal stories that are being
And
told.
and that's something that that tends to hold a lot of people back, and we're going to get into that more. We're speaking with Kathy Barron, the publisher of Women Who Podcast magazine, and our wonderful guests, Amy and Nancy Harrington of the Passionistas Project. And we got to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. Kevin.
This is new for them, so hold on just a second.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, John Verico, and I have to do this because she is just, let's see, and there, and
Hi, Holly.
we have to include her. She is at her real, you know, like job now, and stuff. But she's still a valuable member of our team, and she just tuned in to say hello to you guys. And Kathy, if you don't know Holly, you don't know Holly, obviously. You haven't met her.
Well, for the benefit of people who are only getting the audio version of the podcast, we're talking about Holly Berry, who sent in a message to us through the chat and said, tuning in for an uplift and to see the Passionistas.
And Holly is the one, she has worked with me for 3 years. There's a story behind that I won't get into today, but she worked with us for a long time. She brought actually Amy and Nancy to us. And it is really an important conversation to have, as is what Kathy Barron, who is who's created the magazine, Women Who Podcast magazine. And it's important what you have to say, because I tell you, in the podcasting world, as you know, Kathy, and both Amy and Nancy do, and John, and I do too, it can be a marvelous experience, but it can be full of frustration because there's a lot that goes into it, from the editing to the content delivery to the putting it out there and getting listeners and all of that. It can be really daunting. And you're right, Kathy, the typical, they call it podcast fade is what they call it. And the
Fade, yeah.
yeah, what that is that either 7 to 10, most of them, 90% never make it past 20 shows, because it's not easy. And
Yeah.
I want people to understand that as you're doing your interviews and they're pouring their hearts out to you, this means a lot to them. And I want people to recognize that this is not just some like, here, give me a microphone and I'll do. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and they need to be respected for that. Don't you think, Kathy?
Well, I think every podcaster needs to be respected for putting their show together. Whether parts of it are outsourced or not, but I think that women who do everything themselves are very passionate about their show, and they would love to outsource it, but for financial reasons they're not able to, so they just keep doing what they want to do. They're not letting anything stop them, which is great. And I think the more we encourage and support them, then it makes a huge difference to do it week after week. So you don't feel like you're alone, especially if you're doing solo episodes, having a co-host, you have somebody there, you can kind of cheer each other on when you're having a low day or something. So yeah, I think encouragement and support is a huge part of it.
I really like John to hold my hand while we're doing these because
I think he should.
yeah,
Make it much more interesting.
Somebody has to.
it is so true because it can be really hard. And you said outsourcing, and there are companies that you can go to that can help you edit and and especially if you're going to do video and to do all of that together. But you have to have deep pockets. And this is a point in time when I would very much
plethora of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would very much like to suggest that people go to Kathy's magazine, advertise are you accepting advertisements for your
Yes.
magazine?
Yep. Amy and Nancy advertise and have a few other as well. And
And
they're women producers and coaching, copywriting.
There are people who love the work that you do and love the spirit behind the work that you guys do, but they don't necessarily figure how much it actually costs in time and treasure to be able to put this together. And so if you don't have the time but have the treasure, Amy and Nancy would love to talk to you, as would Kathy. So that would be great.
Absolutely.
Definitely. We would love that. You are right.
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's an important thing, and John has been with us for I don't know how long you've been with us, like 4 or 5 months now, and so he's new into this world, and he's taken to it like a duck in water, and or a fish in water, or some animal in water, and he's
Work, yeah.
and
Well, I'll tell you, with my former day job, working for the government, we had an internally produced podcast that I got to be a host of, which was a lot of fun. But I only had to worry about being the kind of on-air talent. I did a little bit of research and back and forth with the guests prior. And then, we would do these in-depth interviews, which was great, but I didn't have to do all the production work because we had, a team of other employees who actually did all of that fingers on stuff. And about a couple of years ago, there was a friend of mine, a colleague, who she lives in the UK, and she wanted to start a podcast, and she wanted me to partner with her so that we would have, both of our voices out there. And it was a wonderful thing. I was honored to do it. And I had no idea how much work went into putting together these podcasts. And so, we started to do the first couple of episodes. Well, she was, and neither of us had the capital to outsource, like we were talking about. And she was doing all of the editing herself. And it was called A Show of Values. And it was all about, people's values and how we deal with things when they go against our values and all that kind of stuff. We had some great conversations, but it was such a time-consuming and technologically consuming editing process because she was a perfectionist. And I know if you're listening out there, Annalisa, you're a perfectionist and trying to put all these little, widgets and stuff into the video production because she really wanted it to be, hard on the video, and then the audio would follow. But it wound up being overwhelming, just in the time commitment and the technology involved. And so really, Kathy, what I wanted to ask you, the reason why I'm leading to this is because, it died on the vine because we just didn't have the time and the technological resources to make it work. So how can you help people to overcome that barrier and to be able to keep moving forward despite some of those constraints?
Well, I think you need to put your perfectionist in check, first of all. I think the first couple of episodes, you're like editing every and ah, and after a while, you're like, oh, who cares? You know, it's part of the pace. You know, it's part of the character of the person talking, and you want that pacing. You want those spaces in between, because it's just a natural way of how people talk. So, you know, first you kind of have to check yourself with that, and just realize that it doesn't have to be perfect. And as long as the audio is quality, you can hear both people, all the people. You know, video is a whole other, you know, beast in itself. I have a degree in video production, so I know how much it takes to do something like that. And, you know, with just the audio itself, I mean, I would recommend someone who's starting to just focus on the audio part. The video part will come. I know it's hard that you feel like you have to keep up with the Joneses on all the new things, and you got to be on YouTube, and you got to be here, and you got to be there. You know, you have to work with what you can do, and, you know, not be hard on yourself because you're not on 3 social media platforms, and you're not on YouTube, and you're not posting 5 times a day. You know, I think we like have these expectations that that's what needs to be done to have a podcast, and it's not true. You know, I
like
always
that good
emphasize.
reminder. I like that good reminder to put your perfectionist aside and focus on the audio. Those are great, especially for somebody who's got a face for radio like I do. But just to remind them that it does not have to be a big video production, but just, you know, get the story out there, get what needs to be out there. And I love the fact that the ums and the ahs and all of that stuff is actually part of natural speak. And for those of you out there who are Toastmasters and are used for counting the ums and ahs, I mean, I've been in Toastmasters on and off since the 80s, and I'm still the Wizard of Oz. So, you know, just let them be part of the conversation. Only if you say something completely out of whack, you know, or you lose track of what you're saying, you know, then maybe you might want to edit it. But for the most part, you want it as opening. Look at Kevin and I. We don't want our show to come across too polished.
Right. Well, that's just it.
And we're highly successful at that.
Mission accomplished.
I would also like to add to that the robot is your friend. There is, as far as podcasters go these days, there's so many new tools out there to utilize to help you do what you need to do, as far as pulling clips and editing and transcripts and things like that. None of that stuff existed when we started our podcast 7 years ago. You know, we had a foot pedal, and we would retype the transcripts and rewind and type, and it took hours and hours and hours.
Wow.
Do a transcript for a podcast. Now you press a button, and Robbie Robot takes care of it all for you, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that I also tell women that there are no rules. You know, people might say you have to do X, Y, and Z to have a successful podcast. I call BS on all of that, because the rules, it's their show. They can make the rules however they want. They can podcast, submit episodes or publish episodes once a week, once a month, twice a month, whatever works for them. You know, I think that's the other thing is when someone starts podcasting, that they have to do like X, Y, and Z before they can do anything. And that's also holding women back from starting a podcast. Before they even hit record, they're already like, oh my gosh, I can't do X, Y, and Z, so I may as well not even try. And so we need to like forget the rules, just hit record, get it out there, and then, you know, figure it out.
Yeah, and lengthwise too. Like, it doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have to be 40 minutes. Like, do a 10-minute podcast. Get on once a day and give a 5-minute tip. Get on once a month and give a 5-minute tip.
Exactly.
There are some podcasts that are very, very successful just doing that. I, on the other hand, can't do that, but that's just me. But
something to strive for, right, Kevin?
Well, no, but I want. I want, I wanted to mention, and I think this is important. When we say a quote unquote successful podcast, I disagree with the premise. And I disagree with the premise because, quite frankly, there are more than 4 million podcasts, literally, that have been produced. There are approximately 400,000 that have been produced in the last 6 to 10 weeks. So the fact of the honest to goodness fact, like you'll look on the internet and they'll say, well, you're successful if you have 1,000 downloads in 30 days on a particular episode. That's probably not liable to happen. But if your message is sincere and honest, the chances are that the person who needs to hear the message that you're putting out there, the universe will find a way for them to hear it. And that's all you can do as a podcaster. Do you agree with that, Kathy?
Success is based on the person. Like, success could mean, I'm going to publish an episode a week. That to them is success. Or success to them is they're going to post 3 times on a social media platform a week. I mean, it all depends on the person and what their goals are and what they consider success. I mean, it's not a blanket general definition.
And conversely, you've got someone like Joe Rogan who's made $100 million doing it. I cannot listen to the dribble that falls out of his face. I'm afraid I just can't.
I can't even stand hearing his name, but
I know. I just cringe.
There you go.
Mentioned in our presence.
And so he is he makes money, but money is a fleeting thing, but
well,
really,
I don't think it's just that. I think that whatever reason why he has a contract, it doesn't, whatever, it's his deal. The problem is that they need to have more contracts with women, regardless of the situation currently.
Well, do you also notice that he doesn't have any women who co-host a show with him or?
Well, no,
produce
because
for him or any
isn't
of
like his demographic is what 20 something year old men, isn't that?
Well,
true?
if you can call a 20-something male a man, I'm afraid I disagree with
Boys,
Boy,
adolescents.
older boys, because if you're 23, I remember I was 23 one time and I was no more ready to be a man than Flight of the Moon. John, how about yourself?
Oh yeah, I was 23 almost for a whole year,
So, and I agree with you. I think more women.
Actually, 23 is when I decided that my life was going in a crazy direction. I needed some discipline, and that's when I joined the Navy.
And then he sobered up. But you guys, no, I really think that women need to have a much stronger role in podcasting because your life experience is so different than the typical guy. They don't understand
because it's going to get wild.
Buckle up, sugar cup. It's going to get really crazy here coming up. But so Kathy, do you have a lot of people that come to you and say, I want to do a podcast and I don't know how, can you help me? And are you able to give them some tips and to help them through your magazine and through the format?
Absolutely. I mean, the magazine doesn't just feature podcasters. We have articles about pod fade, about imposter syndrome. We have a section called tips and tricks, which are short articles about something that people might not know about that makes it easier for them. We have a low-hanging microphone, which is a take on low-hanging fruit, which is a corporate lingo, which I hate, which is why I switched it around. And that's just another short that gives people a quick taste of something that they may not have thought of that could make it more efficient for their podcast. So we have a lot of articles in there too to kind of help with stress or time management or ways to be more efficient. So it's not specific necessarily to podcasting, it's to life, because their life is podcasting is part of their life, and they do have other stuff going on in their lives.
I think
I
I'm
like that
scared to
piece.
ask this next question, but what is imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome is basically you doubt yourself and you don't think you're good enough to do what it is you want to do. And podcasting is, I think, anything creative that you do can, imposter syndrome can creep up because you're looking at how other people are doing it and you're like, oh, well, that's not how I'm doing it. It's kind of like comparing yourself to others as well.
Yeah. The only person you need to compare yourself to is who you were yesterday.
That's very profound. I like that.
Yeah, sometimes I can get deep. but it's
Yeah.
absolutely true. Imposter syndrome is, and it's actually in all walks of life. It's in everything. We see it, unfortunately, all the time. As a coach, I see that quite often, and I know I've suffered with it myself for most of my life, because I just didn't think I was good enough. What am I doing out here? I'm not as good as that guy. I'm not as good as that woman. I can't do the. And we do that. We talk ourselves out of so much because of imposter syndrome. Because we don't think that we're good enough. I don't know what my camera is doing.
It's bizarre.
Is it an owl?
You're going to make me seasick.
Is it an owl camera? Or?
He used to be in the Navy, so now he's on the ship.
There we go.
And it's waving back and forth kind of thing.
No, it's doing some auto framing thing, and it's built into the computer, to the laptop. So I don't know why it's doing. I don't know what it's doing. Those of you who got the audio version of this podcast don't have to worry about it. But yeah, for the rest of the world,
Dramamine.
Zooming out, it does feel like I need some of that. Kevin, do we need to do another break here? Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna blow it. But see, and that's the thing. That's also the thing about I had John is gonna have to get used to me. I'm afraid that's just. But
I'm trying to train this guy.
He's trying so hard. But see, the problem is that when we have a great conversation like this, I don't necessarily want to interrupt it with commercials, which I suppose if people that have been on the show and we did commercials, they're now saying, what am I, chopped liver? But in this case, it's an important conversation that we're having, and so because John, this is why I was told at one point in time by a guy that had bought my show, and I don't tell this story often, but he bought my show after I was gonna after I had to cancel a Positive Talk on KKNW, and he bought it and paid what I owed the station, and then I started doing the show there. And about a month and a half in, he said, "Now I want you to do this, and I want you to do that." And I didn't do any of it. He looked at me and he said, "You're not a very good employee." And so he promptly fired me from doing my own show that I had created.
So Kathy, what do you do when you've got somebody like this who just refuses to take advice
or direction?
Well, that's why he has his own show. So that's my suggestion.
That's
my advice. Be your own boss and create your own show.
See, exactly. So, like, I can say, Amy and Nancy are going to be on, but weren't they on a couple of weeks ago? Yes, but they're great and they bring great people. But weren't they on a couple of weeks ago? Yes, but they're great and they bring great people. And
make your own rules, right? That's what it's all about.
That's it, baby. I get to make my own rules until I don't, and we'll see when that is.
Hey, can I talk about something that we're doing with Kathy that I want to make sure we get to talk about before
please do.
time runs out, because it's ticking. Kathy introduced us to this amazing event coming up that you also should know about if you don't, which is called Podcast-thon. And she can give you more specific info too, but basically it's a week-long event in March of next year. And what you do is every podcast that participates posts an episode that either they talk about their favorite charity or they interview someone from a charity. And all the episodes are available for listeners to learn more. It's not to raise money, it's just to raise awareness. So we've partnered with Kathy and Women Who Podcast Magazine, and also with Julie DeLuca Collins and Dan Collins from Casa de Confidence Productions, who they're a great podcast production company for people who do want that support of editing and producing and promoting their podcasts. And the three of us have come together with our organizations in collaboration with Jeremy, who founded Podcaston. And we're pulling together women hosted, women produced podcasts, women owned podcasts. And we're going to do a special promotion during Podcaston where, while all the podcasts who are participating will get promoted by Podcaston, our groups are also going to amplify all the women hosted and women owned podcasts as a collective of podcasts by women. So we want to raise more awareness of women podcasters through Podcaston. And Kathy made this introduction to us, and we're super grateful to her that she partnered with us. She let us bring Julie in to be a part of it, and Dan in. And we're super excited. So we're actually collectively accepting applications for people who want to join through us, so that we can get you on the list, we can promote you, and we can figure out where you fit into the block as we promote the different shows that we want to give a special spotlight to. So I just want to say that.
Well, I think that's wonderful.
What a fun project.
Yeah. And now there's a charity that I've worked with, off and on, and what if we were to submit one of those shows that I think they're called the Passionistas?
Yeah, I thought about that.
Yeah, they do a really outstanding job, and we've had some really fun shows that we've done with them. I wonder if they would let us.
I'm sure they would love any donations.
Donations. I have to say, although we're not necessarily profitable, we are not a nonprofit. So we appreciate that.
Although
Kevin.
you could spotlight one of the episodes where we brought on a woman from
There you go.
There's a difference between nonprofit, not for profit, and just no
Not making a profit.
and no profit happening. Yeah.
or there's another category that I just want to make sure everybody knows about is spending your children's inheritance.
A good one. Yeah. Knew I should have had kids.
Yeah, that's
That's why we don't have any.
I had two, and I think they both disown me now. But that's and I'm doing what I love. And if I had a friend when I was just real quick when I was in the food service industry. I quit that to start my broadcast career, and one of the guys that was in purchasing at a party walked up to me. He was drunker than a skunk, and he said, I really value you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you're following your heart, and you're doing what you love, and you really like doing it. And I said, well, yeah. And he said, I wish I could do that. And Kathy, there are so many people that are in that boat where they say, you're doing it. You've got 900 episodes. I didn't always have 900 episodes up, but they're scared. How do you help them get through the fright and to really go after it, to really, and to never quit, even if you're doing it once a month?
I think it's the why behind their podcast, which will kind of help them along. Because if they know what their why of is, why they're starting the podcast, then if they keep their eyes on that, then that's gonna get them motivated and get them through those rough times of fear and being scared, right? I mean, Amy and Nancy, what do you think about that?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And
I agree.
yeah. And I also think find your people, like
Yeah.
that is part of the reason we built the sisterhood. I think it's part of the reason we connect with someone like Kathy. Like, we're all there to support each other through it. We can tell the women who are podcasting in our podcast network in the sisterhood about Kathy's great magazine and her great podcast. And she can tell people who are looking for support to come to us. And we just can be there for each other. And I think part of the fear is, I mean, fear is the largely of the unknown, right? And if you talk to people who have done it and who are happy to share their wisdom as you continue through the journey, then that wipes away a lot of that. So find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And knowing that you're not alone and that people have experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It helps you be like, okay, so this is normal what I'm feeling.
Totally.
And then that kind of definitely helps. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the critical piece right there, is knowing that you're not alone, and that you're not the only one who's gone through this, and that there is a support network and something to learn from other people who've been through it.
Mhm.
So are you guys starting a podcast network?
We have a podcast network.
Yes. Yeah. Within the sisterhood, we have a network of women hosted podcasts. I think it's at about 25 or 30 right now. Our goal is to have it up to 100 by Podcastathon.
Yeah.
And it's really a directory for women hosted podcasts. So women in our community can go there. You click on a link and it takes you to wherever that podcast is hosted.
And can anybody click on that and to reach that? And
It's for premium members in the sisterhood. Any woman or gender nonconforming, non-binary person can list their podcast at no cost to access listening to that podcast network. Right now, it is within the premium membership of the Passionistas Project Sisterhood. And starting in 2025, we're going to start to do more find a guest, be a guest, and pod swaps and stuff for the women in the network, in the premium membership, so that they can connect with each other more directly and support each other in their podcast journeys. So,
I think that's great. And by the way, since I'm not dating anybody and I'm single, can I be buying a non-binary so that I can be on your network?
I don't think it's one of those like flick a switch.
I don't think it works that way.
But I'll tell you this, Kevin. One thing
That's not how any of this works.
No,
Really?
spirit in which you're asking. One thing I will say is in 2025, we do, or as in 25, as I like to call it. I
In
can't
the
say
year
25.
2025.
In the year 25.
Yeah, exactly. Great Randy Rainbow video, last one, by the way, with a reference to that in it. But in 25, we are going to work more on having a space for allies, for our male allies, that will not grant them access to the entire sisterhood, because we need a majority of it to stay a safe space where women can connect with each other without feeling, that someone's watching. But there will be, we know that it's important to have men on our side, again, especially as we're entering into this new phase in the world. And we love men. We don't have any problem with men. So we are starting to make plans for this ally space where men will be able to access things like the podcast network and come to certain events. Like we're going to do a talent show at the end of the year because we have so many amazingly talented passionistas. So we'll probably let men buy a ticket to that and support that. So there will be spaces where our male allies can get more access to content in the sisterhood, while remaining a safe space for the women and gender non-conforming, non-binary people.
So you didn't answer my question.
Your question is a hard no. You can't just pretend to be non-binary. That's not how it works. But I do love you for asking. A for effort.
I'm so sad now.
But the dating scene up in Seattle is not quite what you expected, or?
No. Well, see, there's a rule.
I'm assuming Seattle, since your backdrop is Seattle.
Yes.
You are correct, young lady.
Okay. Okay.
But you see, there's a rule out there. I don't know who made this rule up, but they tell me that you have to get out of your studio if you're going to go find somebody to date, and because they don't just show up in your studio.
Yeah.
So I just assume.
Yeah, it's not the Passionistas Project, for those people who are listening, not a dating site. I know the word passion is in there and everything, and that was something Nancy and I struggled with in the very beginning. It's like, are people going to get confused? Any listeners? Passionistas is about women supporting women. not about finding Kevin the perfect match, which we hope he does.
Oh no, them's days is long gone. But Kathy, we're gonna have to wrap.
is about what keeps you going, right? Your motivation and what burns inside your heart. And so, yeah,
Exactly.
that's all. It's all about the fire that's inside of us, right there.
Ooh,
Magic.
cool.
Welcome to Cheesy Dad Magic Hour.
So, Kathy, we'd like to thank you very much for coming on and thanking Amy and Nancy for inviting you here. And
Thanks for the invite. Yeah.
I want to give you a couple of moments to tell us all about your information and how they can get a hold of you, how they can get into the magazine, how they can buy the magazine. That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So womenwhopodcastmag.com is the website. Everything is there. You can click on magazine and read the featured article. You can see what's in this last issue, which was in October. It's a quarterly digital magazine. And you can also purchase it on the website for $5.99 per issue or $20 a year subscription. And yeah,
quarterly.
Mm-hmm. It's usually about 70 pages. The anniversary issue is much larger. It's usually like 100 and I don't know. It's up there. So the anniversary issue is much larger than the other issues because we have more featured podcasters. So there's usually like 14 or 15. And with other issues, it's 7 or 8. Yeah.
And is it an e-magazine or do you actually produce it in hard copy?
It's digital. Yeah.
Well, but
the days of the hard copy are long gone. I know.
It's too expensive, man.
Oh, tell me about it. I know.
We used to have 2 newspapers in town, and now for those of you that are under 50, you used to be able to buy like the Seattle Times, and there would be a young man that would deliver the paper. I'm not kidding. Deliver the paper to your house, and then he would come by on a monthly basis.
A physical thing.
Yeah, it was a physical thing, and if you didn't get your paper, it was probably in the garden. And stuff. But
our mother used to read 4 newspapers a day. She would read the morning edition and the evening edition of 2 different papers. Remember that?
Yeah, we would get the Sunday paper because it was big. It had all the comics in it.
The comics were there. The crossword puzzle.
Parade magazine.
Parade magazine.
The TV guide so that you could plot out what you were going to watch.
Oh, yeah.
I remember when the TV guide came in the newspaper in February of 1964, and it was sitting there, and I was looking at the TV guide, and these 4 really tall kids with long hair were on the cover of that, and they were going to be on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they were the Beatles, and so I said, "Mom, Dad, look at this." They said, "So." We're watching Bonanza. Go to bed. Anyway. So, Amy and Nancy, if somebody wants to get a hold of you and become part of the sisterhood, how do they do that?
They go to thepassionistasproject.com/membership, and that will take them to the sisterhood, and they can sign up for the free level or the premium level to have access to our podcast network.
And they can buy our
Planning Your Path to Purpose guided journal comes out tomorrow.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
Please, we have to get over the alliteration thing.
This one's a
Very
little
tongue twister.
Let's say it again.
Power of Passionistas, Planning Your Path to Purpose, our guided journal.
Featuring Kathy Barron.
Wow.
Thank you.
Outstanding.
Tomorrow's the day we want everyone to buy.
Available on Amazon.
November 19th. Help us get on the bestseller list. Yep.
Now I got a wager to make the 2 of you. I'm going to send you a bottle of wine. I want you to drink the bottle of wine and then say what you just said. I bet you can't say it perfectly.
3 times fast.
I concede.
Let alone one time.
There's no way. I can't say it without the wine.
Hey, thanks everybody. This has been a great show, and we are out of time.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to have you back again.
We'll see you in a few weeks.
Definitely.
with another quality member of the Passionistas
Passionista
Project
sisterhood.
of the sisterhood.
Thanks.
Thank you guys. And Kathy, thank you for what you do. Somebody is going to do a podcast and it's going to change somebody's life, and you're going to be partially responsible. So thank
Well,
you.
I hope I can be the person to kind of nudge you over the cliff and be there to support you. Yeah.
You'll be that person. So
Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
for being part of it. Take
See you in
care.
a couple weeks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin